What's up everybody, welcome to my Stamina Templar PvE DPS build. This build is mainly for trials and dungeons. This is where you're going to see the best results from this build. I am going to slightly touch upon VMA as well in this video. But we're going to try to make this as short and sweet as possible, so let's jump right into it. Main bar character sheet looks as follows: 17.5k max health, 36k stamina, 2900 weapon damage, and 57.4 weapon crit. As I've said this many times, the stats almost mean nothing. The stats don't tell you the whole story of the character or your build. So again, just because I don't have 17,000 weapon damage doesn't mean that we're not doing the most damage possible. We're having the Thief and the Shadow Mundus Stone equipped at all times because we're wearing Twiceborn Star, and we're using the max health and max stamina food as always on stamina DPS characters. All of our attribute points are obviously into stamina, and we are using the Essence of Weapon Power potions. The way that you make these is Blessed Thistle, Dragonthorn, and Wormwood. They give you major brutality, major savagery, and major endurance. You need all of these. You don't want to run any self buffs or take up any slots in your skills, for example, for using Camo Hunter for your crit buff. So make sure that you use these potions, otherwise you will experience a huge DPS loss. Let's get right into the gear. So our main 5-piece is Twiceborn Star, max health, max stamina, max magicka, and it allows you to have 2 Mundus Stone boons at the same time, which is why we're having Thief and Shadow Mundus play together as well. And again, remember, the Templars have really nice passives that increase your critical damage, such as Piercing Spear. Increase the damage bonus for your critical strikes by 10% and your damage against blocking targets by 10%. Doesn't really matter for the second part, but for the first part, again, you get more crit damage as a Templar, so it's really important to focus on the crit, just like all the other PvE builds. We are running all medium, all divines, obviously divines to buff both of our Mundus Stone passives. Now another set that you can run instead of this is Spriggan. It's pretty strong, and I like Spriggan mainly in Maelstrom, which is what we're going to get into in a second. Another really nice set as well is Leviathan. Now Leviathan gives you max stam, weapon crit, and even more weapon crit. And as I said, the passives from the Templar work with weapon critical really well. So that's another set that you can use. The only reason why I don't recommend this over Twiceborn is because it gives you a base health pool of less than 16,500. It's actually closer to 16,000. So I don't recommend running this. But if you want pure damage and you think you can survive with 16k health, go for it. It's a really strong set. So we have, again, 5-piece Twiceborn, all divines on the body. Our second set is Krogs. The 1-piece bonus is really OP. It's absolutely the strongest 1-set bonus in the game for stamina characters. The second set bonus is when you deal damage, you have a 10% chance to spawn Drulims that create shockwaves in front of you, dealing 1678 physical damage every 0.4 seconds for 1.2 seconds, and it can occur every 3 seconds. So you have a 1.8 second cooldown of this set, but it will proc every 3 seconds for sure, because you do run a lot of dots, so you're constantly dealing some type of damage, and this procs on any type of damage, dots, direct damage, whatever it is. Now the key with this set, in order for it to do the most amount of damage and make sure that these limbs are hitting your target, is you can't be too far away and you can't be too close to the target. So say this is my target right here. I want to be about this far away from the target always, and always aim it directly at the target. So make sure that your cursor is always looking at the target. If you're slightly turned, it's not going to hit. If you're too far away, it's not going to hit. If you're super close, it's also not going to hit. So you have to make sure that you aim these limbs at about a 2-meter distance and directly at the enemy. So that's really important. Another nice set that you can use is Veladreth. It's pretty strong. And another set that you can use instead of Krogs or Veladreth is Stormfist. It's also really, really strong for stamina characters. Our 3-piece set on the jewelry is Vicious Ophidian. This is the strongest set by far for stamina because of the Minor Slayer passive. It gives you 5% more damage in dungeons and trials. It also works in Maelstrom, so definitely use that. If you don't have Vicious Ophidian just yet, you can use Agility as well. And then lastly, we're wearing all Maelstrom weapons, 1 axe, 1 dagger, 1 bow, all of course sharpened. Now, a lot of people ask, well, why would you run Maelstrom weapons on a Stamplar? Don't you just spam jabs anyway? Well, not in this build. We're actually going to be using a lot of Rapid Strikes and jab combinations as well. So let's get into the skills with that being said. Now, before we get into the skills, you can run a Stamplar without Maelstrom weapons and still do decent damage. And I'll explain why in a little bit, but it's mainly because of their skills, and the jabs are really, really strong even without Maelstrom weapons. But empowering dots still puts out the most damage on Stamplars. So yes, you can use 5-piece Vicious Ophidian, or you can even run 5-piece Spriggan, or you can run 5-piece Alkosh and 5-piece Night Mothers. Do I recommend it? Maybe. In some situations, it could be nice. Alcast has a really, really nice build with Alkosh and Night Mothers, where he runs 2 Alkosh daggers, Alkosh jewelry, and Night Mothers on the body. And you're just a buff machine for the group, for the stamina characters. But keep in mind that you're never really going to run more than 2 or 3 stamina characters other than yourself, the Stamplar, in the group. So does it make sense to be a real buff machine for stamina characters? I don't think so, not in my opinion. So let's go over the skills. Our main bar, our first skill is interchangeable. Now sometimes I use Deadly Cloak, sometimes I swap this out for Steel Tornado. Steel Tornado is obviously very useful for AoE situations when you have 3 or more mobs. When you have 2 or more adds, 2 or less adds rather, just spam biting jabs. Deadly Cloak is really, really nice skill for a few reasons. I use this on every single boss fight because it's about a 3k single target dot. Second reason is because it reduces AoE damage by 20%. So hard mode, more of blockage, this is one of the most important things to use. Hard mode, Aetherian Archive, this is one of the most important things to use. Use this on every single stamina character when there's a lot of AoE damage coming out, for sure. When you don't need it, just swap it out for Steel Tornado or something else. Second skill is Jamming Trap. This is one of the strongest dots that we have. It can also be empowered by the Maelstrom weapons, as well as again giving us Minor Force, which increases critical damage by 12%. Again, this is a crit build. We get a lot of passives for crit, so it does boost our damage, not only of this skill, but every other skill that we use as well. The next skill is Rapid Strikes. Now again, a lot of people are wondering, well, why the hell would you use Rapid Strikes on a Stamina Templar? You have jabs. Because we still want to make sure that all of our dots are empowered. It's still a huge DPS increase if you can combine empowered dots with jabs. Next skill, Rending Slashes. Really nice strong dot. Our last spammable skill, this is our main spammable skill, is Biting Jabs. This is our damage filler, so when we're not putting down dots, we are going to be spamming jabs. Now the reason why we don't just spam Rapid Strikes is because Biting Jabs not only is a really strong spammable, but also it gives you major savagery, which increases your weapon critical rating by 2191 for 8 seconds. So again, you're getting more crit by spamming this skill, as well as proccing Burning Light, which is over here. Anytime you're using an Aedric Spear ability, which is jabs, you have a 25% chance to cause extra almost 5k physical damage or 2k magic damage. Now obviously we're focusing on physical damage, so every time you use jabs you have a 25% chance to do extra damage Burning Light. Now I've seen this crit in trials for over 11k and it crits a lot and it hits a lot. It procs all the time. So this is a really, really nice DPS increase as well. Lastly, our last skill is Rend. This is an absolutely OP skill. It can be empowered by Maelstrom weapons. This is a must-have for any situation. Our back bar looks as follows. Our first skill is our Power of the Light. Now, is this the strongest skill in the game as far as actual DPS goes? Absolutely not. But the reason why this skill is so important is because if you read on the bottom, targets are also inflicted with minor fracture and minor breach, reducing their physical resistance and spell resistance by 1320 for 6 seconds. Now, Stamplars are one of the only classes that can run this skill. Another class that usually runs it in trials is our healers. Now, can healers keep this up 100% of the time? Absolutely not. So having a Stamplar always inflicting minor fracture and minor breach is a huge DPS increase for the group, not just yourself, but for the group. The other 7 damage dealers in the group are doing a lot more damage just by you keeping the skill up. And it's also pretty strong DPS ability in itself as well. It can crit for a nice amount. Next skill is usually we use some type of slot filler here. Now, it depends on what you're running. Usually I'm going to have Vigor in the slot. 99% of the chance I am going to have Vigor in the slot. You are, no matter how good your healers are, sometimes are going to need a little bit of extra healing. It's nice to cast on yourself, on the group, when you do see a lot of incoming damage. If you want to be really group oriented, I would actually use Echoing Vigor so it can hit more targets. But Resolving Vigor is really nice for yourself and for Maelstrom as well. So do keep that on your bar. Caltrops, now this skill I also do swap out at times because Caltrops is really hard to sustain on the Templar. The stamina sustain on the Stamplar is pretty hard at times depending on the fight as well. So whenever I can, whenever I'm getting shards, whenever I can sustain my stamina, I do use Caltrops. If I cannot, or I need a little bit more tankiness, I do use Restoring Focus. So for hard mode Maw, I was using Restoring Focus. I would put this down anytime I saw incoming damage. I would Vigor, and I would make sure to keep Blade Poke up because there is a ton of damage coming in all the time. And since we don't run shields like all the magic classes, we have to have some type of tankiness. Now this gives you major resolve and major ward, increasing your resistances by over 5k, and also gives you minor protection and minor vitality, increasing your healing received by 8% and reducing damage taken by 8%. So this skill makes you really, really, really tanky. But again, if you want to go pure DPS and you don't need the tankiness and you're comfortable in the fight, I would definitely swap this out and definitely use Caltrops. Our next skill is Endless Hail. Endless Hail is buffed by the Maelstrom Bow. This is the strongest that we have. It also does incredible AoE damage, so keep this up 100% of the time on as many ads as you can. So make sure that when you're laying it down, if there are a couple of ads around you, make sure that this Endless Hail, the area is not that big, so make sure it's hitting all the enemies that you want to hit. Poison Injection can be empowered by Maelstrom weapons. Keep it up 100% of the time. Make sure it's empowered. And lastly, now, Dawnbreaker Smiting, I would use it in Maelstrom, but usually I would actually run Crescent Sweep. Now, do we ever use this skill? Absolutely not. But by having it on our bar, we get the Piercing Spear ability. While an Aedric ability is slotted, increased damage bonus for your critical strikes by 10%, and your damage against blocking targets by 10%. Now, blocking targets, not very important, but increasing the damage is very important. So make sure that you keep that up, because you do sometimes spend some time on your back bar casting Caltrops, casting AL, casting Poison Injection, casting Power of the Light. So that's a good 3 or 4 seconds that you can be losing out on crit. So make sure that you keep that on your back bar for trials for sure. So let's go over the champion point setup for the Stamplar really quickly. We are running 100 into Warlord, 75 into Mooncalf, and 12 into Tumbling. You don't really need the 12 into Tumbling. I use this for Maelstrom. You can put all those points into Mooncalf if you're not doing Maelstrom. For Maelstrom, I do like a few points in the tumbling in case you do want to roll or break free. For the blue tree, we have 89 into Mighty, 13 into Piercing, 37 into Precise Strikes, 48 into Thaumaturge. Now again, this I was mainly using for Maelstrom. If I was doing pure PvE with tanks and healers debuffing, I would take 11 points out of Piercing and put 100 into Mighty, 48 Thaumaturge, 37 Precise Strikes, and only leave 2 into Piercing. For the red tree, this is a really safe way to do it. 75 Hardy, 75 Elemental Defender, 27 Thick-Skinned, and 10 points into Quick Recovery. Now again, the red tree always varies depending on what content you're doing. So if you're doing Sanctum, I would put more points into Hardy. If you're doing Vet Maw of Lorkhaj, I would put more points into Elemental Defender and Thick-Skinned. But it really depends on what you're doing. So this will always change based on what content you're running. So let's go over the rotation for this Stamplar. It's one of the more complex rotations. It's pretty fun to play though. So every single time we start by using our potion to get our buffs going, as soon as we see where the fight is going to take place, we're going to throw down our Caltrops, use Power of the Light to buff our group damage, and buff with Blade Cloak. Then we start Rapid Strikes, Trap, Endless Hail, Poison Injection. Use Power of the Light, Bar Swap Animation Cancel. Rapid Strikes, Rending Slashes. Rapid Strikes, we see our ultimate is up, so we're going to use Rend, empowered with the Rapid Strikes, then 2 sets of jabs since we did use an ultimate. After 2 sets of jabs, our dots are going down, so we reapply and restart Rapid Strikes, Trap, Endless Hail, Poison Injection, Power of the Light, Bar Swap Animation Cancel, Rapid Strikes, Rending Slashes. And this time, since we don't have an ultimate to use, we're going to just spam jabs 3 times this time instead of 2 times. Notice how we let Power of the Light run out and we don't immediately rebuff it. If we try to rebuff and keep it up 100% of the time, it is going to be a huge DPS loss for us because we'll have to bar swap a lot, and it's only a 6-second dot where most of our other dots last longer than 10 seconds, so it would be a huge DPS loss to keep buffing it. So we only use it once every single rotation. Notice how in our rotation, we're buffing 3 dots using our Rapid Strikes, which is why we use Maelstrom weapons and why we use Rapid Strikes. We buff our Trap, we buff our Poison Injection, and we buff our Rending Slashes. Not only that, but we're also buffing our ultimate, which is Rend, immensely by using our Maelstrom weapons. Another thing that you have to notice is we do rebuff Caltrops when there is more than just one add up or there's more than just one boss up that you're fighting. So in AoE situations, always keep up Caltrops. It is a pretty nice DPS increase. If it's a single target, it's not as important. How do we use Blade Cloak? You want to use it, you want to keep it up as much as you can in single target fights, but most importantly, again, keep it up 100% of the time when you know there's going to be damage incoming. So for hard mode Maw of Lorkhaj, I know that there's going to be big AoE damage when the boss jumps up in the air and smashes the platform. So when he goes up in the air, I make sure that I activate Blade Cloak so that AoE doesn't hit me as hard as it usually does. So that's pretty much it for the rotation. Again, it's a little bit more complex, but it's a different playstyle. It's a fun playstyle. We're buffing our dots. We're not just spamming jabs. And it does do a lot of damage and group utility as well. So that's pretty much it for the build video, everyone. Now again, a lot of people ask, why Stamina Templar? Usually the other Stam classes outperform Stamina Templar. Here's the thing. Stam DKs have Venomous Claw, an extra dot that they can empower. Stamina Nightblades, they have an Execute to offer. They have consistent 8% damage increase without needing Combat Prayer. For Stam Sorks, they have Hurricane, Disintegration, Implosion. It's really strong during Execute. Stamplar, we have Jabs, we have Burning Light, we have Power of the Light, which debuffs all the monsters, increasing the DPS not only for yourself but the group as well, as I mentioned before. So every single stamina class will have something different to offer. So if you master it, if you practice it, Stamthar can do great damage as well. Now again, this build is pretty unique. You don't just spam jabs all over the place. So if you do like it, if you do enjoy it, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button. Coming up next are going to be tanking and healing videos, so I do hope you stay tuned for that. Hope you enjoyed it and have an awesome day. Bye bye.